tell you who we are because our names are right there. And if you don't already know us, we're the three amigos. And tonight's topic is going to be on conspiracy theories. So I find it very interesting. Rod and I were just chatting, and Rav Dror, we were chatting just before we came on live about conspiracy theories. It's interesting that we just came into the book of Shemot recently, the book of Exodus, and we're coming up to Parsha Bo. So this is the interaction of Moshe Rabbeinu with Pharaoh. So that's like one of the original conspiracy theories. You have Pharaoh who now says, "Oh, these Jewish people, there's so many of them, they're going to end up joining with our enemies, and they're going to overtake us. So we need to take care of them. We need to control them." And so this is part of what happened with us going into slavery in Egypt. You have the Meraglim, the spies, was one of the original conspiracy theories in the Torah. You have Korach, when the conspiracy theory against Moshe and against Aharon. So we see these things, and then conspiracy theories, abounded with the Jewish people. You have the blood libel conspiracy theory. So conspiracies are nothing new. And then we come into the modern day, and we just had a situation like thinking about coronavirus. And so for me, we have conspiracy theories, and I think we need to kind of separate the word conspiracy from the word theory. Because at the end of the day, there can always be a certain amount of truth to the things that we're talking about, but not necessarily be total truth. What do I mean? Like coronavirus. We might all agree that the coronavirus started in a lab in China. Okay. But then you had people that were burning down 5G towers in England because they thought that 5G towers were giving people coronavirus. So you have part of that conspiracy theory that's true, but you have another part of it that's nonsensical. So for me, that's sort of my introduction to this. And I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about that.
Please, Rod.
Ah, the first thing is, Rob Michelson, you're using these big words, nonsensical. Now I'm going to have to like one up you.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out the veracity of other words I should use. So, no, look, conspiracy theories, you nailed it, Ira. I mean, I don't know why we're going to, or how we're going to spend a whole hour talking about this, but it is convoluted and quite confusing. Like, there's a lot of conspiracy out in the world that we live, and there are people that are conspiring to do things. Now, we, as God willing, spiritual men, are not pulled from the left and the right all the time by everybody's conspiracy theories. And we want to be people who are very engaged in wanting to know what is true and what is not, what is logical, what makes sense. And oftentimes, conspiracy theories uh, seem to be more powerful to those who carry those theories because they only pose it in questions that are not answerable. They'll go say, hey, like when a plane flies to the west, why does it go up to Greenland to get to Europe from New York? Why don't you just go straight across? It's because the Earth is flat. I mean, they say things, and how are you to prove anything besides give fact? And then if you give fact, they'll go, well, but. So there are some people whose brain seems to be closer engaged in believing conspiracies. And I think one of the things that I hope, Rob Droyer, that you address is guarding your mind from disillusionment and from illusions that aren't real. Because it seems that as we get more advanced in technology and more information that flows, it's easier to cloud our brain with useless, and here I go for my fancy word, banal information that exists between our ears.
We have a major issue here in our days that we are definitely exposed to to lies. Any person who has some knowledge of social media is able to add it and to create videos and to bring up to the front, even with money, just to advertise and to make his videos popular. Any idea, any concept that he just feel like advertising, and many of them will be based on lie. So from one side, we are able to enjoy other people's sight and point of view and knowledge for them being exposed to certain things, and we want to hear their honest report on things that matters to us. But on the other hand, we cannot control which video will come into our screen, and some of them will be based on false, on imagination, on maybe even negative, bad agendas, like bad will to create lie, cover the world with lie, to create certain damage. So this is one point that is very important. And why is it so important? First of all, for us to be cautious, for us to be careful, not to be hurt by any rumor, by any false claim. The second is that we're not always able to deal even with the real news. Sometimes some of the truths that we are being exposed to can be too heavy. Some people are not able to handle certain news. If you have a certain theory on a certain disaster that took place, and for one person that his family was not involved in that disaster, he can easily embrace the theory. But for someone who lost a child, God forbid, in that crisis, in that terrible event, for him to start thinking even about that someone planned it, that someone wanted it to happen, that someone made money out of that situation, this is something that may be very, very harsh to deal with. So we need to be very sensitive with ourselves on what we are embracing and what we are accepting into our mind systems.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that there is a lot of truth out there that is being exposed, and we need to not to avoid the truth, but definitely to protect ourselves from the lie.
Right.
Yeah. So two good points that jumped out to me. First, on what Rod was talking about, I would describe this idea that some of the people that you're talking about that sort of will believe some of these things, they would be described as having conspiracy thinking. In other words, they're already predisposed in a way to accepting these kind of things. And then to Rav Dror, your point, that's exactly something Rod and I were talking about before we came on, was this idea that, for instance, I gave an example that somebody sent a video around during COVID, and it was a doctor. And so they saw MD after his name. And this video was sent out. I mean, it got over 1 million views, the video. I spent 10 minutes researching this gentleman and come to find out that he almost had his license revoked because 3 of his patients died in the way he treated them for cancer with some kind of alternative medicine that ended up killing them rather than helping them. And so it's very true that sometimes today, especially with social media, if you have a little bit of money, you can put out a beautiful video with amazing music and Hollywood style action, and the next thing you know, people are sucked into that. So I think it's very important that, I'm not saying that everybody has the ability to research maybe the way I do, but at the end of the day, we have to be cognizant that just because somebody can put a YouTube up, or somebody can put a TikTok up, or a Twitter up, that it doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth. I think the other point that I want to make is that for a lot of people, conspiracy theories are coping mechanisms for them. Because they're searching for the truth, because they're predisposed to this type of thinking, that when they hear something that makes sense to their predisposition, they automatically accept it, and it's okay, and it helps them to cope with some of the issues. And I think that speaks more to maybe what you're talking about, Rav Jor, on people's mental state and how they deal with things emotionally. But I think what's important for us is to address the idea that the truth aspect of it. That the reason why I said at the beginning that we need to separate the word conspiracy from theory is because theory is just that. Theory is not necessarily the truth. A theory can be eventually proven to be true, but it's not necessarily true in and of itself. But there are situations today where obviously something starts as a conspiracy theory, and then we find out that absolutely everything about it is true. So, for instance, you may have a situation where people think that a particular group rules the world and controls the banking system. It may be true that there is a group of people that does that, but not necessarily the people that you think. So that's the point that I would make, and I think maybe that's where we need to transition into in the conversation.
The question is what the person will do. Like the poor guy that sits in front of his computer and just been exposed to a certain piece of knowledge that is troubling for him, that he really wants. Like, for an example, I have a new student that I'm in touch with, and that guy is suffering from a lot of his understandings, a lot of his way of thinking is affected by the understandings that he came up with, or videos, or like information that he been exposed to. And his life became very hard. Like, he realized now that he doesn't want to be involved with the government, and he doesn't want his name to be in the systems, and he doesn't. So now he doesn't have health system. His wife is under a lot of pain and she cannot be treated well. Like, many situations become to be much more complex. And again, the fact that he chose to go in a certain way was because of a certain point of truth. Like, that was his main motive that brought him to take decisions in his life. But most likely he did not consider the situation well enough to be calculated, to be cautious, to be sensitive to his situation. And people need to be aware to themselves. And even if you do want to make a change in your life, or you do want to take some steps to protect yourself from evil influences, you need to consider your steps wisely for you not to be break under the new burden of being independent and taking those steps on your own, and like living your life in the nature or whatever. Like, okay, everyone is free to take his decisions, but for the sake of your success and the happiness of the ones who depends on you, every one of us must be aware to the reality, and not only to jump into those conclusions and to change their lives because of it.
There is an idea that we have within Jewish wisdom of guarding your eyes, and we always talk about the issue of modesty and lust and those things, but we need to guard our minds as well. And I do want to address, there are some people who are so anti-conspiracy theorists that anytime they hear something that is inconvenient and truthful, it's automatically thrown into this large cesspool of, conspiracy. Like, that's a conspiracy theory. No one believes this, right? You have that one side. But then you have another side, and I noticed that one of our commenters on the YouTube said the government is too big. Many of our governments are just bloated, huge organizations, and the issue is whose fault is that? As citizens, we have allowed our governments to become that big, and you can do something about it. But there's the other part of a conspiracy theory that takes and paralyzes a person, that causes them to isolate themselves. They become paralyzed with an enormous amount of fear and confusion and betrayal that they feel. And they also feel alienation from other people because of their philosophical view of life. And that is not healthy mentally nor spiritually. And Rob, you had mentioned that this individual that you know, and I don't know about YouTube, but I regularly get text and emails and Facebook messages of all of these conspiracy theories that exist. Some might be true, some are not true, some are just downright illogical. You go, there's no logic behind it. There are others you go, it could very well be true, but it's so far out of my wheelhouse, I honestly don't care. Like, okay, I just don't care. There's nothing as a single person, me, can do about that situation. But I, for sure, can maintain my focus, maintain my bearing in what I'm doing, and keeping a solid, sound mind in this whole approach. And that's what I'm hoping that we accomplish at the end of this, is to help that individual that sort of gets sucked into it to like step back, just kind of take a breath for a little bit, just look around.
So Ira mentioned the fact that he's investigating, that he is like learning, trying to go into the depths, to the core of truth, and to understand what really goes on. If it's to search a little bit more, again, it's also a risky path because you can be exposed to the exact same content by the same YouTubers, by the same uploaders that are uploading that information. So you're just going to drown deeper into that swamp. But Ira, try to give us another practical advice how to save ourselves.
First of all, you have to remember there's a little bit difference with me because I do have a security background. So when I'm talking about investigating, that's why I said people don't necessarily have the ability to investigate the way I do.
Maybe you should write down a list, and we're gonna expose the truth. Which are the theories and which are the conspiracies?
So this is one of the things that we're talking about, and what you guys are bringing up is extremes. So there's no question that somebody writes a comment that the government is too big. There's no question that the government is too big. But you ask the question, how did it get that way? We gave up our rights. Right. In many ways, whether you live in the US or you live in Israel, these become nanny states. People depend on the government. Government comes up with programs to make you dependent upon them, and you become dependent upon them for everything. And then you end up giving up certain rights. So when you talk about extremes, you can talk about the extreme of politics. There's a whole move where a particular group of people are trying to take people's guns away, right? So then you have the Second Amendment movement where people are on the other extreme, where you're never going to take my guns. So you have people that are going off the grid and they're living out in the country and they're burying guns in the ground in PVC tubes so that when the government comes, they're not going to be able to take their guns from them. And they have like 100,000 rounds of ammo and 50-pound sacks of wheat and everything else because they have to figure out how to cook and they have water systems and everything. These are extremes. The big thing for us is, first of all, as three guys, Rod talked about the spirituality, we have to bring that into it as well, that at the end of the day, we're not denying the fact that conspiracy theories exist, and we're not denying the fact that there is a certain amount of truth to some conspiracy theories that go from being theory to being truth. And so for me, that's the thing. Like I said before, there's no question that, for instance, Rod and I, when we, towards the end of another show that we used to do, when we used to do the show with Jerry, you had a guy that was very connected to military sources, and he would come up with information that was going on in the world that really most people would not know about. Some people would think that those things were conspiracy theories until you talk to a guy like that has information. I have certain connections that I get information from that also is not available to the public. I'm sure, Rav Dror, you have connections to people that supply you with information that might not be public knowledge that some people might think are conspiracy. No?
Actually,
No?
I don't have a clue. Actually,
What
I
do you
don't
mean,
have.
Hashem? You don't hear from Hashem?
Those are not people.
Okay.
Rob Jor is going, no. I don't want black helicopters showing up at my house. Don't put me in that list.
No,
I don't
my
want anybody
point is
my bags of hummus in the backyard.
Yeah, the point that I'm trying to make is at the end of the day, like I said, transition from the fact that there is a certain amount of truth. Like I said, are there potentially, for instance, you have a guy like George Soros. That's public knowledge. Everybody talks about this. This is a guy that's a multi-billionaire, and there's no question that he is throwing tons of money in certain directions in order to affect politics, in order to affect the direction of governments across the world. This is happening.
Those things are not hidden anymore. Those are
This
public,
is not a conspiracy theory.
Those are public events and lectures that are being recorded and videoed and spread around the world.
Right.
Those are not theories anymore.
Exactly. So that's my point. My point is that you have situations that turn into truth. I talked about this before. The CIA, people would have said, "Oh, mind control." What about mind control? It's come out in recent years that in the 1960s and 70s, the CIA was doing just that. They were experimenting with LSD, with acid, to see whether or not they could control a person's mind and cause them and allow them to affect their will. It was a conspiracy theory that's now proving to be true.
So there was one conspiracy theory that what's his name? Charlie Manson. That Charlie Manson was controlled by the CIA, and they made him do what he did. Right. And everybody's like, that's nuts. That's crazy. But Charlie Manson was one of those guys that went into a house of prostitution in San Francisco and was given LSD as part of the experiment.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever talks about that fact. Now, I don't think the CIA was directly involved in trying to commit murder. That's ridiculous. But the point is, there is some truth to the fact that governments that have power, and I don't care what government, they can do some pretty nefarious things. And as citizens, the only response that we can do is to demand transparency and honesty. I'm not sure that you'll ever get it, but we've got to also be careful not to get ourselves wrapped around this old country phrase, to not get wrapped around the axles with something that you can't control and you cannot fix. So be aware, be wise, but also don't let yourself get consumed by these things.
I think that the advice of prayer, the individual prayer, is always important to be mentioned, because this is a tool for life, and it's healthy and helping and very, very powerful tool to help the person to deal with the impossibility of life, with how complex life can be. And when a person is coming to a certain edge, to be under certain amount of pressure that is sucking his life out already, that person, except for knowledge and truth, needs to have another lifeline, another path for salvation. And I think that the individual prayer that you as a person, anyone as an individual, will take to yourself to a quiet place and just pour your heart in front of the maker of the universe and tell him, listen, it's overwhelming. Like, it's way too much for me. Like, there must be some truth in it. And I'm like very afraid to think that I'm under such like evil control. And I do want to save myself, but I do need to eat. I do need to drink. I do need to maintain our health policy, security, social security support. Like, many people living by the government, and you can say, "Oh yeah, that's why. That's how you became lazy. That's how," like, whatever. Some of us are not able to go independent and to be Tarzan in the forest and to take care of our lives and
Right.
start planting on our own and hunting our own meat. It's like not everyone are able to do so. People are living in gigantic cities. People are already in huge debts. They have tuition for their children in school, middle of their childhood. You cannot really cut life in the middle because of some theories. And you do want to connect to the truth, but sometimes it's too heavy. So I think that the prayer of the individual, first of all, will be useful for yourself as the individual that is asking from Hashem to help him deal with what he learns and what he understands. And the other thing is that prayer is helpful and useful for all. When you pray, the prayers are not only healing yourself, they're also healing the ones you're praying for. If you cry about our troubles, if you're including yourself with the rest of the world or with your nation or with your state, your prayer will bring down bounty and safety and confidence and security to all your population, to all the world population. So it's a very important thing to pray, really to express your needs and your fears in front of the Maker and to talk to Him from the heart. We must uplift our understandings to that level of connection with the Maker. Except for being truth seeker, we need to be mercy demandings. Like we need to beg for mercy. We need to ask for mercy. We need to bring down healthy bounty to heal and to stabilize our lives and the lives of our loved ones.
You know, Rob, you have for years taught on this single subject to elevate it to its highest level. Everybody would know if I were to say, "Do you know Rob Dror?" And they would go, "Yes, the Amuna guy." Right? You've talked and preached and spoke about Amuna, which is to have, you know, ultimate faith and trust in God. And, you know, I used to be, you know, I was in the Army. I worked for the government and I was in emergency management. So I'm like one of those guys that has the mindset that Ira was talking about. And, you know, you have your survival food, and you have the things that take care of your family in a disaster. But outside of that, I'm not driven by a fear. I'm driven by Amuna. I realize that I can do so much to prepare, and what I can do, I should do. But I'm not going to fret about the rest because of that faith that I have that there is one God. There is that God who is the sustainer of all things. He's the great conductor of life. And so we have nothing to be concerned about except putting our trust in God. And that's why when you talked about faith, and over the years you talked about it's about to do personal prayer, like spending time really communicating with God. You do what you can do, you do what's within your limits, but also express it to Hashem to increase your faith and your trust. Because ultimately, if the whole world were to go to absolute Armageddon overnight, I'm still going to be doing what I'm doing today because I'm walking in my relationship with God. That's not going to destroy anything.
The reason why I brought up in the very beginning, in the introduction, the idea that we had what people would describe as conspiracy theories in the Torah, like Pharaoh and Korach and the Meraglim, the spies, is to prove the idea that there's nothing that exists in the world that the Torah has not already covered.
Right.
And so to Rav Dror's point, when you're doing Hitbodedut, when you're having this personal prayer, you have to realize that every neshamot, every soul was originated metachad kisei hakavod, from underneath the throne of glory. And I'm talking about whether you're Jewish or not Jewish. You have a holy soul. There are some people that might dispute that with me, but this is my position. And as a result of that, when you connect to that place within yourself, so that when you go to a quiet place, whether it's a room or the forest, if you just quiet yourself and you don't say anything and just try to connect in that way, then what you're doing is you're connecting to that which in you is already holy. It's the connection you already have to the creator of the universe. And so what ends up happening is if you don't have words, words will be given to you. And if you can't come up with words, then if you have to grunt, then just grunt. And Rabbi Nachman says that if you can't even do that, then there's the silent scream. You scream within yourself. And I assure you, you will be heard because you're connecting to that inner point within you, that holy soul that already exists in you.
You know, can I
Yeah,
add something? You said
definitely.
something, Ira, it's really important. Noah just came through one of the most traumatic events in world history. Very traumatic for himself. Said that he barely slept, so busy feeding the animals. It was a 24-hour a day operation. And when he came out of the ark, it said that amongst building a vineyard and getting drunk and all that stuff, suffering with tremendous post-traumatic stress, said that he built an altar to Hashem. And it said that he didn't speak a word, that his heart was so much in anguish because he said, why should I build an altar to Hashem if he's going to do the very same thing again to these people that come out of this generation? It said that he cried out to Hashem from the deepest part of his being. That is the first example of Itzbadadut, personal prayer. He didn't form any words except for the fact that from the anguish of his heart, that is what he presented to God. And of course, God gave Moses, Noah, a covenant that he wouldn't destroy the people. Why did I say all of that? Is yes, there are going to be tragedies and difficulties come. There are going to be times in which there are people laying traps against you. David Melech says it over and over, how his enemy lays traps to try to snatch him or to snare him. And he was constantly in prayer to ask Hashem to defend him from those things. Yes, we're going to have those moments. But at the same time, we also know we can go back to the source. And that source is prayer, Rav. You're spot on. I mean,
We need to give people the practical tools for them to know how to deal with their life pressure.
Mhm.
So I think that in conclusion, definitely we need to learn more on the theories that we are hearing and being exposed to, and not to deny them, as Rod said. First of all, to be open-minded. Some of them might open your eyes and brighten your mind to learn that some situations might be toxic, that some things that you're enjoying them in your life might damage you, like many kinds of food that becomes cheaper and cheaper while other products prices are rising, and you should also question why. And not all of them are healthy, and not all of them are good for you, and there are um, many illnesses and sicknesses and sensitivities, allergies to people that are more common in our generation than they were in the past. And it's all about nutrition and about food consuming. So definitely we do need to learn from the knowledge that is being provided to us, but we need to be very careful. So like Aya said, we need um, to investigate, to learn some more, to try to expand our knowledge, and to make sure that we're not falling, and that we're not falling into theories, into conspiracies, and that we are investigating for the truth and searching for it. And of course, that on top of all those, to back them up with the honest prayer that will bring the blessing of Hashem to help us in our journeys, to straighten our path, and to aim our hearts to investigate and search in the right places, and to be safe and secure from all kinds of darkness. For that, the most useful tool is the personal prayer, just to talk to the Maker as you talk to your best friend, just to ask for the things you need, just to really be open hearted and flowing your words out as water. And when it's hard, so at least to express your will with an honest desire for revealing, for truth to be exposed and seen. I'm so
And don't be
thankful
afraid.
that
Don't be
Hashem helped
afraid to be
us.
angry either.
There's nothing
I'm
wrong with
very
that.
thankful that Hashem helped us to join forces that way and to speak about those matters. And I'm sure that that many of our followers will enjoy the variety of our opinions and our different sources of knowledge and information. They're all required.
Mhm.
We have a very wide range of students and followers and friends who are enjoying our content and learning from us. So it's very good that we are the three of us, and this great triangle will not be break easily.
Oh,
And
I'm going to change the triangle for a second, just so I can do some housekeeping here, and not cover up anybody's face like we did. I just put up a link here that's probably also on the Facebook pages, and just asking if you have the ability to help us, that you would. You can go to amuna.com and click the donate button. We're very thankful if you're able to do that. I want to put up a link to Rav Jor's new book, Return to Your Root. Sometimes you hear us talking about Gugulim, this idea of reincarnation, and talking about the souls and the inner point of truth. There's a very informative book. If you want to learn more about that, in those concepts and some of the things you hear us talk about, there's an amazing book for you to be able to get. If you want to see Rod's content, we're trying to get a banner for you, Rod. Hopefully by next week we'll have that worked out. It's Netiv, netiv.net. Rod, if there's anything else
Yeah,
that I'm...
if anybody that is not Jewish is interested in studying basic principles of wisdom and ethics for the non-Jew and the Noahide laws, please go to netivonline.org or netiv.net, netiv.net. And also, there are several books that we're working on. Some are already on Amazon, and we're working on a series of children's books as well. So we're very excited about bringing wisdom to the smallest child to understand the stories of the Mishnah and Torah. So we're excited.
Awesome. And then there's my book, if you'd like, Science of Kabbalah. If you're interested in Kabbalah and you don't know a lot about it, this is a very basic introduction to the concept of Kabbalah and how it relates to science, and how modern science is now catching up to what our sages have already talked about for over 1,000 years.
I think that the word basic can be also changed to I think essential information, like very solid information. I think that basic makes it a little bit not presented with the right honor. I think those
what I mean is it's really for somebody who doesn't have a foundation, if you will, in Kabbalah. And there are so many people that want to learn.
So I do want to mention that after reading that book, you will definitely going to have a very wide perspective and understanding about Kabbalah, and it's covering many, many important topics. So it's not an introduction; it's a real solid, written in very simple language, truth that is very useful for truth seekers to know about the real secrets of Kabbalah.
Right.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, brothers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.